All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're literally tearing down the mental models that are keeping you stuck in a relentless cycle of burnout. If you're absolutely exhausted by this whole good vibes only spirituality and frankly toxic positivity, you're going to want to listen up. Think of us as systems architects for your mind right now. We're going to show you exactly why fighting your internal contradictions is the root cause of your stagnation.
Seriously, are you exhausted by the endless treadmill of forced positivity? I want you to really ask yourself, is trying to cure every single negative emotion actually the thing that's making you feel completely paralyzed? You know, we're conditioned to suppress anything unpleasant, but that suppression, it's suffocating your internal operating system.
And when we suppress that natural friction, we crash straight into what's called the diminished self. It's a massive systemic bug. Basically, it's a state of deep stagnation and toxic shame, where your flexible survival strategies have hardened into this rigid, regurgitated need for control. You end up hiding behind a mask, completely stripped of your actual inner vitality.
So here's the trap. On one hand, you have motionless peace. This is stagnation. It's trapped potential energy, kind of like that shaky, anxious feeling when you try to relax but your mind is just screaming at you. On the other hand, you have generative friction. The modern obsession with motionless peace is a total illusion. Generative friction, psychological disruption, is actually the required physics for human growth. The psychologist Erich Fromm actually warned us about this positivity trap decades ago. He pointed out how social conditioning demands that we repress our natural hostilities in exchange for this enforced friendliness. But you know what that does? It just creates societal numbness and a totally fake sense of security. Conforming to norms that conflict with your actual needs literally vacates the depth of your human experience. Okay, Section 1, System Mechanics, the Antifragile Mind. Let's look at the hard mechanics of how a complex operating system actually thrives.
So, let's talk about Nassim Taleb's triad, which maps exactly how systems react to disorder. It's pretty straightforward. A fragile system is harmed by disorder. It just breaks under stress. A resilient system merely survives the shock and goes back to the status quo. But an anti-fragile system, that's entirely different. It goes way beyond resilience to actively use disorder, chaos, and stressors to flourish.
Taleb puts it perfectly. Disorder isn't necessarily bad. In fact, by depriving a system, like your mental ecosystem, of chaos, you are literally starving it of the raw materials it needs to build extra capacity. If you want a system to get stronger, it absolutely needs a stressor to push against.
Now, apply that exact triad to your psychology. Look at how these different system types respond to negative emotions. If you start treating your mind as an anti-fragile system, you realize psychological friction isn't a bug at all. It's a required feature. While a fragile mind burns out, and a resilient one just hits motionless peace, an anti-fragile mind benefits from negative emotions. It takes the heavy lifting of dealing with stress and overcompensates, building undeniable capacity.
The math behind this is just fascinating. When you apply a stress scenario pulse to an anti-fragile system, you mathematically get a convex response. The performance levels actually rise. The system doesn't just recover to its old baseline, it creates permanent positive improvement. It adapts and gets exponentially stronger.
And this isn't just modern systems theory. The legendary psychoanalyst Carl Jung mapped this exact architecture in the human mind. He called it individuation. It's this process where your inner wisdom transforms and integrates crises, leading to true psychological wholeness. But it demands that you actively cooperate with your crises rather than just wishing them away.
Jung actually proved this through his intensely personal Red Book. He used deep meditation, what he called active imagination, to deliberately confront overwhelming unconscious material directly. He knew that facing the dark, archetypal patterns of yourself is literally the only way to elicit rebirth and synthesize real inner unity. You can't run from the dark. You have to integrate it. All right, Section 2, the Chaos Patch. Enter the Trickster. How do we practically disrupt these stagnant behavioral loops? Well, we deploy a chaos patch. To break free from the prison of rigid social order, you've got to activate the Trickster archetype. The Trickster is a vital, systemic chaos agent. It's an incorrigible boundary crosser, whose main job is to act as the unconscious, checking the rigid judgments of your ego. It prevents your internal order from hardening into a fragile tyranny. But we have to make a really crucial distinction here.
between the sovereign trickster and a reactionary joker. The sovereign trickster breaks things intentionally for renewal. It pokes holes in your ego inflation to shatter false blueprints so you can build something vastly better. The reactionary joker just breaks things purely out of trauma and resentment to watch the world burn. We want the sovereign trickster. So what are the trickster's actual systemic functions? It mocks rigid rituals. It violates societal taboos. It prevents cultural hubris. Ultimately, it drives this massive creative destruction that is perfectly designed for renewal. When your life gets too robotic, the trickster shakes the table, forcing you to adapt and evolve.
Even ancient Hermetic philosophy and chaos magic teach this concept through the coincidentia oppositorum, the reconciliation of contraries. It's the idea that good and evil are recognized as just poles of the exact same thing. Those seemingly chaotic or demonic forces in your psyche, they aren't enemies. They are formative aspects of yourself that simply require integration.
Which brings us to Section 3, System Reboot, the Sovereign Shift. We've mapped the architecture and introduced the chaos agent. Let's talk about rebooting into true personal sovereignty.
Because the ultimate goal isn't a motionless void of fake peace. True dynamic balance means the sovereign self operates perfectly at the edge of chaos. That's the phase transition right between rigid order and total disorder. It's a state of active readiness. You aren't hiding from life's stressors. You're standing right in the storm, loving the wind that tests you.
So here is your practical transmutation drill. Step 1, identify the internal friction. Get into that Jungian shadow work and locate the pain. Step 2, empower the trickster. Let it shatter your rigid behavioral loops and fragile coping mechanisms. And step 3, harvest the energy. Transmute that raw stressor into actual, usable capacity. When you commit to the results of this integration, it completely resolves your psychological one-sidedness. Rather than suppressing the darkness, you uncover hidden, formative potential. You transcend those basic dualities of good versus bad, like finding that Eastern philosophy unity, and you achieve genuine psychological maturity.
So, I'm going to leave you with this one stark question. If internal friction is the literal required fuel for your antifragility, what parts of your true sovereignty are you suffocating right now by trying to fix your negative emotions? Stop fixing yourself and start integrating yourself. Thanks for tuning into this explainer.